She called it book club. I brought the wine. The bookmark gave itself away before I was ready to be suspicious. It wasn't paper. It was a ribbon, red, satin, the kind that makes you think of gift wrap and the moments that follow. I found it lying on our kitchen counter, looped once like a secret that had stopped to catch its breath. On one end, stitched in tiny white letters, were two words, Chapter 7. My wife, Leela, reads with the devotion other people reserve for religion. She can argue a comma like a defense attorney. A ribbon bookmark wasn't unusual. The words were, "Our books don't have chapters, they have titles. Cookbooks with photographs of implausibly clean counters, novels that teach you 30 new words and one new ache." Chapter 7 felt like an appointment. "Don't wait up," she said that evening while she stood at the mirror and tied her hair into a knot I'd untied 100 times with my mouth. "Book club." Again. I tried to keep my tone light, the way you do when you're testing a wire and praying it isn't live. "This one's a new group. We're rotating houses. I volunteered snacks next month." She smiled at me in the mirror. It was the smile she uses to make my stubborn heart unclench. A small upward tilt that begins in her eyes and ends where my resolve used to be. She wore a blouse I'd never seen before. Black, with a deep V held together by tiny loops of fabric that seemed to be just barely cooperating. When she leaned forward to ring for a ride, the blouse negotiated with gravity and lost. I put my palms on her waist. "You could cause a traffic accident," I said. "That's why I'm not driving," she said and kissed me quick, a punctuation mark, not a paragraph. "Wish me good discussion." "Bring me Chapter 7, I said, and felt her body go very still for half a second before she recovered into motion again. "I'm a wine buyer for a small chain of restaurants, which is mostly an excuse to keep talking about desire without anyone rolling their eyes." After she left, I went to my phone. The ribbon lay on the counter, quiet as a dare. I opened our shared calendar. Nothing. I opened the rideshare app and found the last address she'd gone to the previous Thursday, North Ash Lane. Not a house I recognized, not a friend she'd mentioned. I told myself she was allowed private geography. I told myself that trust is not a trick you perform once and then leave in a drawer. Then I took a bottle of Garnacha from the rack and a corkscrew from the drawer and drove to North Ash Lane. The building was a narrow brick thing with a door painted the kind of blue that knows it looks good. One window on the third floor glowed warm like a confession you give to someone who already loves you. I stood on the sidewalk holding a wine bottle and my breath. When I finally buzzed, a voice came through the speaker that made the phrase book club sound like it had changed its mind. "Who is it?" "Delivery," I said, which was true in the least interesting sense. The door clicked. On the third-floor landing, a woman opened before I could knock. She was maybe early 30s, my wife's age, wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater the color of smoke that knew every contour of her. Her hair was a dark, deliberate mess. She had a scar at the corner of her mouth that didn't apologize for itself. "Hi," she said. "You must be the wine." "I'm Ethan," I said, and her eyes widened a fraction, surprise, not alarm. "So you're the plus one no one told me about." "Something like that." I lifted the bottle. "I brought Garnacha. It can talk about cherries and pepper without showing off." She smiled and the scar turned conspiratorial. "I'm Jules," she said, stepping back. "We do first names here and pretend we're not judging." The apartment was all wood and windows, and the kind of plants people love as long as someone else remembers to water them. 3 other women stood by the couch, each balancing a glass and a plate, a corner of the room between them mapped with small triangles of cheese and olives that looked expensive on purpose. My wife was at the far end, laughing with her head tipped back like a photograph. The blouse had already unnegotiated its V a little further. She saw me and the world stuttered in her eyes. "Surprise," I said softly. "Ethan." She tried to fold my name into welcome, astonishment, and a request that I not embarrass her all at once. "Everyone, this is my husband." The word husband made a small, delicate sound as it landed, as if it had been set down on glass. I poured. I'm good at pouring. People like a man who can look them in the eye while he fills their glass and says something that makes them forget for a minute all the things they pretend not to want. I made a joke about tannins. I asked about the book. They were reading a slim novel with a cover that didn't give much away. Jules leaned against the back of an armchair as if furniture had been invented for her to interpret. "We're experimenting with theme this round," she said, eyes sliding over Leela, then back to me. "Desire as architecture, the way wanting rearranges a room." "Sounds like my job description," I said, and the women laughed gently the way women laugh when they know exactly what you mean and are deciding whether you're safe. While they talked, I watched Leela. She wore a thin red ribbon wrapped twice around her wrist like a secret bracelet. She didn't touch it. She never looked at it. But it was there, pulsing at the edge of my attention, beating the words Chapter 7 in silent Morse code. Someone read a paragraph aloud. It was clean on the surface and dirty under the skin. Nothing you'd get flagged for on YouTube, everything your spine would recognize anyway. Hands on a kitchen counter. A breath at the base of a throat. The promise of a door left unlocked. The room warmed. I didn't say anything, but I poured again and again, and the garnacha did what it does best, made it easier to say the truth in pretty words. At the break, Jules came to stand near me, her shoulder an inch from my arm. She was smiling in a way that told me she knew I wasn't just the man with the bottle. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm great," I said, which was almost true. The part of me that loves theater was eating popcorn. The part that loves my wife was standing at a locked door, listening. I didn't know Leela's husband was a sommelier with stage presence. "I'm mostly good lighting," I said. "I also alphabetize our spice rack by heat. I'm full of useful flaws." "Useful flaws are the best kind." Her voice dipped, then resurfaced. "We don't usually have visitors." "Then I'll be on my best behavior," I said, "except when I'm not." Across the room, Leela was laughing with a woman in a green dress, the strap of her blouse slipping an inch, recovered by two fingers that knew how to make a small gesture look like a chapter title. She caught me watching and held my gaze for a beat too long. Then she looked at Jules, then back at me. The triangle between us hummed. We returned to the book. Someone mentioned agency and someone countered with impulse, and I said something about how the best vintners do less, not more, and the room smiled like I'd taken a side without admitting it. When we reached the page marker, they'd literally clipped a small red ribbon into the binding to mark Chapter 7. Jules said, "Let's do something reckless." The room grew quieter in that way. Only reckless invitations can manage. "Let's pair this chapter," she continued, nodding at my bottle, "with a game. We'll call it annotation. Each person adds a line to the story, a possibility you'd never try but think about anyway. No explicit stage directions, keep it artful. We pass the glass as we go. Whoever holds it speaks. No one interrupts. We write the chapter we want and then we leave it in the room." They looked at me like I could veto or bless the idea. I lifted the garnacha. "House rules," I said. "Let the wine be brave for us." The glass began its circuit. Hips grazed chair arms. Words got more elegant and less innocent. A woman in the corner spoke about a kitchen door left unlocked because trust is a choice. Another woman imagined a mirror fogged by breath that spelled out a name and was wiped away by a hand that didn't belong to the person you'd expect. Nothing pornographic, just sentences that knew how to tilt. When it reached Layla, she held the bowl of the glass as if it were a heart you could overhear. She didn't look at me. She didn't look away either. "I want to be watched," she said softly. "Not in a crowd, not at a party. In a room where the person who watches me knows the sound I make when I'm lying and the sound I make when I'm trying not to." My name wasn't in the sentence, but it might as well have been printed across my chest. The glass moved on. Jules took it last. She let the wine sit against her lips, then spoke like the room had signed a confidentiality agreement. "I want to be the reason someone remembers they have a body. I want to stand 2 inches too close and see what honesty does to their mouth." She looked at Layla when she said it. She looked at me when she set the glass down. After that, there wasn't much left to read. Everyone pretended to check their phones at once. Scarves found shoulders. Plates turned into dishwater. Goodbyes spawned plans they didn't intend to keep. When the door closed on the last woman, only the three of us remained. Jules at the window, Leela by the couch, me anchored by the table with the empty bottle that had done its work and was ready for a nap. "I should have told you," Leela said, eyes on the ribbon at her wrist, "that this wasn't really about books." "I guessed," I said, and tried to keep my voice from breaking into either anger or relief. "Is this about Jules?" Jules didn't flinch. "I like your wife," she said simply, like she was declaring a preference for butter over cream. "I like my wife too," I said. "That's the plot twist." Leela took a breath that lifted the blouse I had not yet given permission to exist. "We kissed once," she said, the words carefully enunciated, a testimony given to the court of a kitchen. "Week 3. After everyone left, it wasn't an accident. I came home and stood in the shower until the water went cold and decided I was either going to end my marriage or end the lie. I chose to end the lie. Then I didn't actually end it. I told myself it was my secret to manage. I told myself you had your work and your words and your easy flirtations. I told myself you were fine not looking too hard. That was me being a coward. I'd prepared a dozen speeches on the drive over. None of them started with the word that came out of my mouth. Okay. Leela blinked. Okay. Okay as in, I heard you. Okay as in, you should have told me and you didn't and we're not going to pretend that isn't a cut. Okay as in, I still choose you, and I want some things too. Her shoulders dropped. Jules drifted back toward the bookshelves as if curiosity and courtesy were wrestling under her skin. "What do you want?" Leela asked. "I want us to stop outsourcing our bravery," I said. "I want what you said during the game, but I want it in our house, with our names. I want to watch you because you want me to, not because you're trying to see if I'll notice. I want to be the reason your ribbon ends up on the counter because neither of us makes it to chapter 7. Jules smiled at that, not unkindly. "I think that's my cue to bow out." "You were never a villain," I said to her, meaning it. "You were a catalyst. Chemistry class is over." She stepped closer to Leela, touched the ribbon at her wrist, and then, carefully, reverently untied it. "You'll be fine," she murmured, and there was something sincere and sisterly in it that I didn't expect. She placed the ribbon in my hand like she was returning a library book. When the door closed behind her, the apartment got very quiet in a way that wasn't empty. Leela stood there with her blouse and her breath, and the particular vulnerability of someone who has come back to their own honesty and is waiting to see if it will be welcomed. "I'm angry," I said, because truth requires an inventory. "And I'm jealous in boring, predictable ways. And also, I'm lit up. Because I walked into a room where 3 people were brave and wanted things out loud. I want that with you. I want us to be the heat source again." She came to me like she had a compass under her ribs and I was north. She reached for my face. We kissed the way you kiss when there's a small crowd of sentences standing around you, all of them bowing and clearing space. I slid my hands under the back of her blouse. Her skin was warm and knew like it had been ironed smooth for the occasion. "Take me home," she whispered against my mouth. We didn't break any rules the internet would object to. We took a slow elevator, a slower car ride, a hallway that echoed the sound of our restraint. In our kitchen, I lifted her onto the counter because the book had mentioned a counter, and sometimes it's polite to honor your sources. She laughed into my throat, and the sound reset a clock I hadn't realized was running fast. I won't describe the rest except to say that some doors are better closed so the rooms on the other side can glow. Later, when we lay in the warm wreckage of a bed that knew our names again, Leela drew a circle on my chest with her fingertip. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not regret disguised as poetry, just sorry." "I know," I said. "Me too, for all the ways I let autopilot drive." We made a deal you could write on the back of a matchbook. Thursdays were ours. No friends, no clubs, no excuses. We'd cook in too few clothes and eat with our fingers and make eye contact that didn't blink. If we wanted to read out loud, we'd read to each other. If we wanted an audience, we'd let the mirror be enough. The red ribbon lives in the kitchen drawer now, coiled beside the corkscrews. Sometimes Leela ties it in her hair when she's making coffee and looks at me over her shoulder like she just wrote me into a chapter I haven't seen yet. Sometimes she wraps it around my wrist before a tasting and tells me to use my words responsibly. We go past chapter 7 now. It turns out the book is longer when you stop skipping pages. A week after the living room literature class, a small square envelope arrived in our mailbox, addressed in Jules's precise hand. Inside was a single index card. "Be good to each other," it said. "You're both very readable." We are, and for the first time in a while, we're writing in ink.